Hi, I'm Anna, and welcome back to the Somport Deep Cut. Before we begin, a tiny disclaimer. Please forgive my pronunciation of certain names. I do my absolute best, but the court door and my Indian tongue sometimes negotiate their own treaties. You'll still get every detail you need, even if a few vowels take creative liberties along the way. Today, we are continuing the region by region series with Burgundy. Burgundy is one of the most rewarding and the most unforgiving regions in diploma theory. It shows up often, but never in the same way. Sometimes it's hierarchy, sometimes it's style comparisons, sometimes it's a business question disguised as a vineyard question, and sometimes it's all three at once. So, in this episode, we're not trying to memorize every appellation, we're learning how to think Burgundy for the exam. Whenever Burgundy appears in a WSET question, there are usually three things being tested at once: your understanding of its hierarchy, your ability to link vineyard detail to style and price, and your grasp of how Burgundy actually operates as a wine business. Let's start with the hierarchy because it's foundational. Burgundy's four levels form a vertical logic ladder: regional, village, premier cru, and grand cru. And the examiners want to see that you understand why each level exists. Regional wines generally come from flatter sites with richer soils and less ideal aspects. Village wines sit above this, often on the lower parts of the slope, still good terroir, but not the finest parcels. Premier crews cluster around the mid-slope where drainage, sunlight, and shelter align. And Grand Crus sit in the heart of the mid-slope on the most favorable soils and aspects, producing wines with concentration, complexity, and aging potential. If a Burgundy question even hints at hierarchy, this slope logic is the backbone of your answer. From hierarchy, we move into style because Burgundy rewards students who can explain why a wine tastes the way it does. Take the Côte de Nuit versus the Côte de Beaune. The Côte de Nuit leans limestone and is home to many of the most powerful Pinot Noir sites. The Côte de Beaune has deeper soils, more clay, and produces many of the region's greatest Chardonnays. Across Burgundy, aspect and slope position matter enormously. Vineyards at the top can struggle with thin soils and cooler conditions. Vineyards at the bottom can suffer from richer soils and less ripeness. And the mid slope brings the balance that defines the region's top wines. Add to that the climatic challenges: spring frost, hail, vintage variation. These are not footnotes in Burgundy, they are style drivers. They influence yields, ripeness decisions, harvest timing, and winery sorting. And examiners expect you to explain these links calmly and clearly. Now let's talk about winemaking. Not every detail, but the decisions that matter for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. For Chardonnay, you'll see choices around oak use, lees contact, malolactic conversion, and fermentation vessels. Chablis may avoid oak to preserve purity, while the Cordon may use barrels, with the proportion rising as you move into Premier and Grand Cru territory. For Pinot Noir, whole bunch choices, cap management, maceration length, and new oak percentages define style and structure. Pinot is delicate, so winemaking should always be explained as intention, not as a checklist. That's the key. Burgundy winemaking is never about listing steps. It's about linking decisions to the final balance, texture, and aromatic profile of these wines. And now the part most students forget: business models. Burgundy's trade structure is examinable. You have domains, negociants, cooperatives, and micro negociants. You have fragmented vineyard ownership, inheritance laws, and extreme variability between producers, even in the same climats. Understanding who grows the grapes, who makes the wine, who bottles it, and who sells it is essential. Even within a single ground crew, quality can vary dramatically depending on the producer. Business isn't an extra, it's a core to how Burgundy questions work. Now, what hasn't been tested recently but feels ready? There's scope for Côte de Nuit versus Côte de Bon comparisons. There's the newly elevated Premier Cruise in Puy-Fuissé. There's the contrasting business dynamics in Chablis versus the Côte d'Or. And there's the marketing position of Burgundy as a whole: small production, high demand, soaring land price, and huge differences between producers. These are subtle but highly examinable angles. So here's how I study Burgundy myself. I start with hierarchy and slope because once I understand where a wine sits physically, I can predict both style and price. I link vineyard challenges to decisions: frost, hail, ripening, sorting, canopy, yields. I keep my style comparisons tight: Chablis versus Côte de Bon, Côte Chalonnaise versus Côte d'Or, Montrachet versus Petit Chablis. And I don't forget business, especially negociants, domain bottling trends, and Burgundy's fragmented ownership. When I study like this, Burgundy stops feeling overwhelming. It becomes a system I can navigate, not a maze I need to memorize. If you'd like the full written version of this strategy with the past papers, the hierarchy breakdown, the vineyard logic, and the business angles, I've linked my comparison article under this episode. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.